and welcome to another episode of Voices of Holt. My name is Daniela, as you already know me, and I'm co-hosting this episode for the first time with Toshi. Welcome, Toshi.
Thank you.
He is always in behind the scenes. He's the one who edits the episodes. So for the first time, you guys are going to see him actually in front of the camera. Actually pretty cool, right?
Very exciting, very exciting.
Good. But the surprise is our interviewee today, Professor Keane. Welcome, Professor Keane.
Thank you so much.
So nice to have you here. And well, guys, today we're exploring a topic that is one of my favorites because, as you may know, I am a management major. So it's pretty exciting. We are exploring a little bit about Professor Keane's journey and his advices as someone who is very, very, experienced in different types of businesses and industries and can give us a lot of background on any kind of management and even data. So let's go ahead on that. And first of all, so to give you guys a little introduction, Professor Keane is one of my professors and is one of my management professors. So he teaches management here. He also teaches CM4 and strategy and challenge. And he can talk about his new assignments and projects soon. And let's start with you. Let's give the stage to you. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Thanks so much, Daniela. So I've had quite a long and diverse career. I've done a little of everything, really. I've been in management, ownership of businesses, and also I've consulted with people as an advisor. And now, of course, I'm teaching. But all of those blend together. They give me a really good perspective of both sides of the fence, both the owners of a business as well as people thinking of buying a business. I've been in the shoes, so I have a pretty good idea. I really started my career quite a long time ago with Kimberly-Clark, a large global consumer goods company. And at Kimberly-Clark, I had the opportunity to work with CVS drugstores at the corporate office level. We were some of the first, I say we, as other companies were involved, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Kimberly-Clark, that we all had banded together to create a comprehensive new marketing campaign for CVS. And at that time, it was brand new. There weren't a lot of loyalty cards out there in the different retailers and supermarkets. So we had that chance to be able to look at all these big data, right? A lot of data at the time, and really come to some conclusions of who the particular customers were at CVS. And we broke out these different strategies, and it was really insightful, very valuable to the company, but also led to some successful marketing campaigns for CVS at that time. So that was just one big story there. Then I proceeded to move into business ownership, and boy, what a challenge that can be. Okay, so that gives me a good idea, again, putting myself in other people's shoes, when I talk to a new business owner or somebody who's trying to start a business, what it entails and the different things that you're going to have to do, the different steps, but also you have to have a lot of skill sets. One of the things I look at when I'm talking to a potential client about starting a business is to gauge their skills first in that industry. Secondly would be see, are you passionate? Are you really excited about this, starting this business up? And third, I would say, are there opportunities? Is there a market for this business? Because you don't want to have skills and passion. There's really nobody out there to take advantage of it. So put those three factors together, and I get a pretty good benchmark of if this client's going to be able to succeed or at least move to the next level to move up. So that's something I really enjoy doing, being an advisor, working with small businesses in particular. I did have, as I mentioned, that first business of my own. It was a wellness center. Didn't know a lot about yoga and massage and Reiki and all these alternative healings at the time, but I learned a lot quick. And it grew quickly. It grew over 3 or 4 years to the point where 2 investors came in and offered really a generous amount for an offer. And we took it. And the business continued to run for another 10, 15 years. It's still in business now, which is a good plan if you're looking for an exit strategy, that you can leave it in good hands. And the business continues to sustain itself and even pick up momentum. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty much a success story as far as my first time really venturing into entrepreneurship. I enjoyed it, but it was very, very tough.
And I was going to ask you that. Was it hard to let it go after all the work you put in then selling the business?
Yes and no. So the yes side was you put everything into it. I say blood, sweat, and equity with people who run businesses. It's everything. It can be all-consuming. But in that particular case, I thought the timing was right. Business was profitable. It was going to be put into good hands. So I felt confident
moving on from that opportunity to let somebody else take it from there, take the reins. But that's not always the easiest thing for people to do. If they're running their own business, they become so personally entangled in the business that it's part of their identity. And at that point, when you have a potential buyer and they're ready to sell the business, it's very difficult for some people to let go.
I think this is not only about like intelligence as if you're smart or not, but it's also about EQ. So you have to be emotionally intelligent enough to understand that business is business. And sometimes it's hard to let go, but you have to let it go. And it's the best decision not only for the business, but also for your own mental and emotional stability.
Oh, absolutely.
Because as you said, there's so much more that you put into being an entrepreneur, and you were obviously excited and invested in your business, but understanding the pros and cons and seeing the offer as something positive, you can move forward.
That's right. Everybody has their own timing, right? So when I talk to clients, I just have a recent example I can share with you for dry cleaning business. There's two owners that ran this business for over 20 years, and they were in there day in and day out, doing all the work, and pressing their shirts and dealing with the customers. And they said, we're getting up there in age. I think it might be time. And the pandemic didn't help either. A lot of businesses really took a hit and didn't rebound. And this was one of the cases with dry cleaning. So these two owners, I found them a potential buyer. We moved forward. And then when we got to the very end of closing on the sale, one of the partners started to have second thoughts. And that's when the broker or an advisor or a consultant usually jumps in and says, look, let's talk this out. You decided to sell this so you could move on to something better, to retire, to go on longer trips with your family, take a break. And one owner was ready to just, let's go, let's finish this up. I'm ready to close this, give him the keys, and let's go. The other owner was very hesitant. And his concern was really surprising, was that he was worried how the new people were going to deal with the customers. Are they going to have enough staff? Are they going to keep it to the level of quality that we had? And I had to have a frank talk with him. Say, look, this is something you put a lot of effort into. You put the blood, sweat, and equity into this. This is really a payoff for you for all your hard work. And it's going to go into good hands, so don't worry. So you have to be kind of a psychiatrist, psychologist. At the same time, when you're working, it's not all transactional. It's quite a bit of it it's emotional.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really guide your advice to the personalities of the people that you're dealing with, particularly these owners that have been vested in business for more than 10, 20 years. So.
Totally. And now that we talked about your experience and understanding your background a little bit better for our viewers / listeners, I would really like for you to tell us, in very simple words, maybe the three most common mistakes that business owners make. Because you've talked about how you do it as a consultant, how you help them. But what are those mistakes that some of the time they make that then you have to come in your hero costume and go and help them?
Well, first and foremost, Daniela, I would say you got a plan. And when you plan, you got a plan. Those are really the key things. Don't jump into something without knowing what you're getting into. Try to look at the risk, right? Look at also the opportunities. But at the same time, you also want to have an idea of, is this going to be a good fit for me? You're going to be putting a lot of time and effort into it. So I'd say poor planning could be one of the first indicators it's not going to work. Secondly, probably just as importantly, is lack of capital. I would advise somebody thinking of starting a business, first thing you should do, assess your financial situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have adequate liquid assets to be able to jump into this? Or do you have a good relationship with a bank lender? One or two lenders is probably a good thing to have before you actually sign a lease on a building. You got a good relationship there, you can count on them as time goes on, hopefully, and it really puts everything into a good, positive opportunity. Thirdly, again, know what your passion is, know what the opportunity in the market is, but also what is your skill sets, and if you don't have the skill sets to start that business or maintain that business, try to learn as much as you can quickly.
Perfect, love that. I think that with the financial planning thing, it's very important because I remember one of my other dear professors of management, which was Professor Turner. used to say all the time, guys, if you're even gonna save the whales, even for save the whales, you need profit. Profit is the first thing you need to make, and for every business to be successful, you need to make profit. So that financial planning, not only during the business, so even if you obviously need how to get out of a problem, and those kind of things like calling Professor Keane to get you out of the jam, but also to know how to start the business and when you're on the planning space, to be able to do that kind of thing of understanding that what if something goes wrong, I have a plan B, and if it all goes well, I don't have to put money out of my own pocket, because most of the time, if all of the money that you're investing in that business is from your own pocket, then it'll go wrong at some time, and unexpected things can happen, like the pandemic. Nobody was expecting that.
Yeah, you summed that up well. But yes, the bank relationship's really important too. But I tell a lot of people, I'm also a SCORE, mentor. SCORE is an organization of typically retired executives, some of them still working, but I think we have 80 members in the Boston chapter alone. And we give free advice to people looking to start up a business or to maintain a business, and even form an exit strategy. But I'm always trying to give those clients something to keep working on, right? That's one of the keys. Keep the ball in play, right? You don't want to just stop, like, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to do it next year. Just continuously have benchmarks set that you're going to move this forward, even in small incremental steps. So I give homework to some clients. I say, next time we meet, we're going to have you do this, this, and this. Work on your marketing strategy. And we'll review that, and then we'll move on to the financial picture. So again, it's always a process to keep things moving.
Also, I was meaning to ask, how can a client get into that program? Like, how exactly can they get into the SCORE mentorship?
Oh, sure. Good question, Toshi. So you can just go simply go to score.org, and it'll give you the Boston chapter selection. And you just contact them, and they'll set you up with a particular advisor. Again, there's 80 advisors, and out of those 80, all walks of life. Some are lawyers, some are just small business people. Some are also bankers, lenders. They'll give you advice on all different things. You can pull them in as you need them too, which is really great.
Do you need any like prerequisites to get into it, or they just accept everybody?
Pretty much everybody. It's wide open. So even if you have a budding idea that you just want to flesh it out a little, you can contact the SCORE advisor, and they'll help you hopefully bring it for fruition.
Excellent.
Love that. So now that you realize these are the bad things that happen, this is what you should take care of, and you've already explained this, how do you come to someone and tell them, this is what you should do? Or that's how you approach and realize and address this problem, especially when they're deeply ingrained in what they're doing currently. It's hard to change, and we've talked about this in management class, how changing can be challenging and how hard it is to approach it. So what is that kind of approach you take when guiding these people?
That's a good question. So I would typically, we use something in Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a global organization for public speaking. And when we have somebody go up and give a speech, we'll evaluate them after the speech. There's usually a designated evaluator. And we use what's called the sandwich approach. The sandwich approach is the bottom layer is basically to say, hey, great job. You really stood up, you did it. Very good speech, impactful. But then we hit them with the critique, right? We gotta give them something to work on, right? And that's when you subtly put some ideas like, maybe you could have talked a little slower, or maybe you could use less hand gestures. All those different things. But then we finish it with, overall, excellent job. Can't wait to hear your next speech. Keep it going. So again, I use that with clients too. They might have a problem to address, and I'll tell them, look, you've done all this work all these years, back to the dry cleaner, right? 20 years of hard work, great customer base, and then you give them an inside thing like, maybe you can kind of modernize the equipment a little, maybe you could do this, and then you go back to I think we can find a successful sale, a buyer for this business, and you kind of move forward from there. So, that's one thing I do. But again, it's always having that relationship and the opportunity to be able to talk to the owners or the sellers, really on a personal level. That's the key.
Perfect. Love that. Okay, so are there any specific red flags that you see in a business? I love the term red flag because I feel like it covers so much ground. But what is that thing, that those specific things that you're like, you know what, I know this business is not gonna go well. or end well, or we need to sell this because of these specific things?
Good question. Yeah, there are significant red flags you can spot. One would be actually being physically on the site of the business, and if it's during regular working hours, you could hear the crickets chirping. I mean, there's nothing going on, right? So that's one obvious indicator that you could visually see it, that there's no foot traffic, there's nothing going on. So that might be one indicator. Two, if the owner asks you to come to the back room to his office, and he says, I operate under 2 different sets of books. And then you go, oh no, what do you mean? And there's the books for the IRS, and then there's the books that are, what's the real volume, what's really happening? And I'm very reluctant to even touch anything else after that point, if there's 2 sets of books. Huge red flag. Thirdly, I would just say, you try to forge that relationship with the client, but they don't really tell you everything going on in their life. Some people don't want to tell you that there's a family member who's sick, that's forcing the sale of this business, or maybe they're going through a divorce or something personal. So it's good to know everything up front. It really helps the process, but sometimes you don't get the whole picture. And that's a challenge right there.
Okay. Bella, you have anything else?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's hard to let a business go and to be on your position, because obviously sometimes we think of the owners who must have a hard time just trying to process this. But isn't it emotionally sometimes like a burden to you personally to have this all experiences? Because I bet you've experienced talking to people that are just like crying in front of you and saying, I have a deadly illness, or I'm trying to sell this because I need to pay for my son's treatment, or something like that, something that might be like an emotional burden that it's hard to handle. I've seen that with other professionals, like lawyers who need to detach from certain cases, doctors who go through that. But in the business industry, especially as someone who is a consultant for some type of businesses, mostly for small businesses, you must have that challenge too.
Oh, sure. I've encountered some of those situations before, but typically, trust is the most important, right? You want to have the trust of the client, you want them to trust you, so you're not going to share a lot of that information that the 2 of you, or 3 or whatever, talk about with a potential buyer or somebody interested in the business, unless it's something that they want to release. So again, you're a confidential source, confidential advisor, and a trusted resource. So all those things, you got to really compartmentalize it to know what the given situation is.
Have you ever had to avoid working with a client because any of those situations?
Yeah, not too far back, there was a gentleman who was trying to sell a long-standing business. It was in the southeast region here, and he developed Parkinson's disease. And he progressively got sicker and sicker during the process, to the point where we really couldn't continue the listing because it would have been too tough to move through the sale process. I didn't have a viable buyer at that time either. So yeah, these things can happen. Everyone has different things they're dealing with. But if your client shares the whole truth with you, it helps you move through a little quicker and base your choices on that.
Must be tough.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
On the same note, what is that thing that you would say, like, what is that key factor if somebody's like, okay, I'm trying to become you, in the future, and I want to have the same skills of being able to sell a business that doesn't look really good. For example, a dry cleaner right now, I don't know exactly how I would sell it, because we have so many things. And everybody has, right now, every building that you rent, especially in this area, has a dry cleaner in the building. So you're not mostly using those kind of things, or they're less and less that the people use it. It used to be a time where everybody would dress up with suits. Like, all the professors here would use suits, but I can count with only one hand which professors, if there are any, that are wearing suits right now. So you're not.
I do.
You do from time to time, but you're not right now.
Today.
So that kind of thing is it has shifted that kind of business. So how would you pitch this to someone that's trying to buy it, and something that's really hard is sticking to the dry cleaners example, maybe?
Well, unfortunately, the numbers do the talking for you, right? So if you're working with a potential buyer of a business, you have to share, after they sign a non-disclosure agreement, you have to share all of the business's financials. So they'll go through that themselves and really draw conclusions, or they'll see a trend. And that's kind of how it works. It's all about the numbers in the end, you know. The relationships and everything are very important on both sides, but when it comes down to the sale process of actually selling the business, it's almost always just going to turn to a transactional business arrangement, where emotions really shouldn't take too much of a part of that process of closing.
Well, I know you mentioned before the business have 2 books. Have you ever had to work with some business that necessarily had the 2 books and you had to find a way around it?
I've got no comment on that, Koshi. I don't want to see anyone get audited.
Okay. No, but I mean, not any business specifically that you mentioned, but like what can you do in that case?
Yeah.
So you like just tell them to like straighten it out?
The way that you pose that is much better because I can answer it truthfully and say that you would go with only what's reported to the IRS or the tax authority at the time. So that's the true numbers that you have to present to the client.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Surely. Have you ever encountered some experience where it's like there is no ethical space for me to do something? From the numbers, like, and maybe more emotional / operational kind of thing, where you're like, there's something going on here, and they're not telling me about this. There's something sneaky, and I want to get out of here. Have you ever felt like this is not okay?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Sometimes that's happened where you automatically can feel something is just awry. It's not making sense. And you try to talk through that with the potential client at that time, but if you can't get to the bottom of it, I wouldn't take the listing, or I wouldn't want to be their consultant in that case. I would just step away. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that are ethical that you could feel comfortable working with.
Totally agreed. I love that you get to choose who you work with, because sometimes that's the nice part of being a little independent to a certain point, especially when you're in the business industry. Because when you're an employee, you get to work with whatever you get assigned to do. It's not like you can choose with what students you want to work or not. Unfold.
I've been lucky so far.
Yeah, that's good.
That's great.
That's good. It's not going to be always like that.
Well, let's not jinx it.
Hopefully we won't change that. But just to close it up, last question is obviously a little bit of advice from someone with experience. What would be that career advice that you give to business owners or managers for the tomorrow to avoid the mistakes of when most of the businesses you encounter with already made or are on the way of making?
Good question. I think sometimes small business owners, they get kind of in a silo. They don't have a lot of outside resources or connections, either in the industry or just in business overall. So I'd say at the very onset, try to develop a mentorship team. People from various walks of life that can help, be an ally, really, to help you with your business, give you advice. Like I mentioned, SCORE, there's plenty of offers out there for people looking to start a business, sustain a business, and most of it's free. Most of it's pro bono. So it's not a bad idea, especially when you're starting off with a new business with a limited budget, to try to seek out as much free advice as you can get from industry experts and otherwise.
Perfect. Would you recommend to get paid advice? If you can, like if you can pay for it, would you say that's a good investment when you're starting a business?
Definitely. I think depending on the scale and scope of the business, that's definitely one to pull in professional advice, if possible. Yes.
Okay. We got to my favorite part of the ending of our podcast, and thank you very much for all of it. But my favorite part is asking the question from the past guest, the surprise question. So how this works is that for every guest that we have here, we ask them a question from the past guest, and then you get to give a question to the next guest. You don't know who's going to be. It's a surprise, but you get to choose whatever question you want to make for that person. So Toshi, would you do us the honor?
Yep, of course. So the question for this week is, if you could go back 5 years, what would be a thing that you would change?
5 years. So pre-COVID?
Yeah, just before 2019.
Definitely I would not. If I knew COVID was coming around the corner, I would have been so vigilant, locking myself down in the house for a year with my wife, 2 dogs, and spraying groceries down, and really not seeing any friends or family for a good 12-month period. I really regret that. It was a bad decision in hindsight, right? But if I had to go back in time, I wouldn't have been so recluse, I guess is the word. I would have cautiously gone out there and been a little bit more active and social.
Really?
Wow.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wouldn't have expected
Yeah,
that.
So not scared at all. Like, let's just go and do it. Okay, that's certainly not something that I expected. I'm glad that was your answer.
Yeah.
Super nice.
Totally.
Unexpected. So now it's your turn to lead that question for our next surprise guest.
Okay. I would ask, with AI, artificial intelligence, would the next guest think it's going too fast, it's going too slow, or it's being at just the right pace?
Perfect.
That's-
You can go
I am
very
curious
deep
about
into that one.
Yeah.
I love that. Deep thinking, very
Yeah.
techie. I like it. I love how these questions are so diverse. We get super personal questions and other that are like, if you could be any animal in the world, what would you be like? People are so creative, and I love that. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate
Thank you, guys.
it.
Of course.
Thank you,
Thank
Toshi,
you.
for being with us too. Most of the
pleasure.
time, Toshi is behind the scenes and is part of the production. Without Toshi, episodes wouldn't be possible. But now you get him in front of the camera too, so thank you for listening today. And today the weather's pretty nice, kind of chilly, but the sun is super out, so we got pretty good lighting for this episode. Thank you for giving a few time of your morning, and thank you everyone for joining us in another episode. Hope to see you again soon.
Bye.